Alright guys, so now inshallah we're going to move on to the next part, which is the idea of for loops. Before we get into for loops, there are a couple of things that we need to go over. Number one is that the idea of a while loop. So the while loops, as we discussed above, we discussed while loops. These are loops essentially that continue to execute so long as there is a certain condition that is met. As long as that condition is true, the lines that are within the loop will continue to be executed on and on and on. And once that condition becomes false, the while loop will cease to execute. Now, one important thing about while loops, and I mentioned this over here, is that while loops, they are called indefinite loops, because they keep going on and on until a condition becomes false. The idea being is that this while loop will continue to execute for multiple. You quite literally in many cases don't know exactly when it will come to an end. So that's why it's called indefinite. It will indefinitely continue to go until that condition becomes false. Now this is important to understand because you also then have the concept of for loops. And for loops is the second type of loop that we're going to cover in this class, and these are referred to as definite loops. So while loops are called indefinite, and for loops are called definite. Why? Because for loops generally they execute over an exact number of items. So and that gives you a little bit of a clue of what for loops exactly are used for. And they are generally used to iterate through the values within a string, a list, a set, etc. So while loops can be used, for example, to are more dynamic in the sense that they can be used for many different other things, for loops, on the other hand, are usually used to loop through a very specific item. And over here, I'll show you guys an example. So in this line of code, we start with word equals hello. Then we say for letter in word, print letter. So this is a simple example of a for loop. So what is going on here? So if you trace the output, if you were to put this in a computer, you'll find that first the output, it'll print out H, then it'll print out E, then L, and then O. Meaning that what is happening over here is that it is printing each and every single letter of hello separately. And that is actually what this loop over here is doing. This variable called letter is what is known as the iteration variable. And that may ring a bell because when we were talking about while loops, we talked about the idea of iteration variables. These are the variables in this example over here. N equals 5, while n greater than 0, print n equals n minus 1. This variable n, was called the iteration variable. This is the variable that every single time the loop is executed, its value is updated, its value changes. So first it's 5, then it's 4, then it's 3, then it's 2, then it's 1, then it's 0. Similarly, in the for loop here, the variable letter is an iteration variable. Every single time that loop is executed, its value updates. Its value updates as it goes through the string or the list or whatever. Lists and stuff obviously we'll cover at a later time. For example, so again, when it first starts off, the value of letter will be H because that's the first letter. Then it'll be E, then it'll be L, then it'll be L, then it'll be O. So you see every single time the loop executes, there is the value of that variable letter is updated. Now you can name this whatever you want. I named it letter. You can name it L, you can name it character, you can name it whatever you want. But obviously you can't name it word because word is actually what you're going through. You already defined word up here, so you can't use word, but you can use any other word that you want, any other name that you want. So that's the first component of this for loop. The second component is this word in. This keyword in essentially tells Python that you want to go through whatever you specify one by one, element by element, meaning when I put in word here, I'm telling Python that I want to go through word one step at a time. H and then E and then L and then L and then O. That makes sense? So this keyword in basically is what tells Python that whatever I'm going to now put, I want you to go through that one step at a time. Okay? And then as every single time you go, and as you are going through that thing, one element, one item at a time, whatever value you're currently looking at, store the value of that in the variable letter. Okay? So this is one very simple use case for for loops. Now another one that is also going to be extremely prevalent in this class that we will be using a lot is the concept of when it comes to range. So this is one very important one. So sometimes you want to go through a list of numbers within a range. Okay? 1 second. For this in Python, we use range. Now what do I mean by this? So I'm going to give you an example and then I'll explain. So let's say I say for I in range 1, 6. Okay. So again, very simple example. So what exactly is going on here? So I'm saying for I, so I is the iteration variable. I is the iteration variable that changes every time. Whose value changes every time. Okay? And then I have the value in, the word in, which means that whatever is next, we want to go through that one step at a time. Now, what is this doing? That's the real question. Okay, let's put that over here. So when I put range, the first value is where you want to start. The second value is where you want to end. Okay, so when I put 1, 6, for example, this means that go from 1 to 6. But, and if you guys remember when we talked about string slicing, we mentioned that every single time, whenever you, the end value that you put, if you put, for example, if you put word equals hello, right? And then you said print word from 1 to 3. Remember how we mentioned that this last value, it doesn't include it, right? So it would go from 1, it would return E, and then 2, L, but it would not include the third index. It would just be E and L. So similar thing over here for I and range. Go from 1 to 6, but do not include 6, okay? So it will go from 1 to 6, but it will not include 6. So now what will happen is if you look at the output here, you'll see that it'll first print out 1, then it'll print out 2, then it'll print out 3, then it'll print out 4, then it'll print out 5. And like I said, it won't include 6. Okay? So this is a very important syntax in Python for I, because there are many, like I said, there are many use cases in which I will tell you. So let me give you an example. Let's say I tell you to create a program that counts the total of the numbers from 1 to 100. Let's say I tell you something simple like that. Okay? The code to implement this is quite simple. All you do is for I in range, for I in range 1, and you want to go till 100, right? So you do 101. You don't do 100, you do 101 because you want to include 100. Okay? Then you say total equals to, so you first set total. Again, look at what you have here. You're going to need a variable to count the total. So initially the value of total will be 0. And then you do total plus I. Again, similar thing with while loops, similar thing with if statements. Anything that you want executed in that block, you got to indent. So if I want to print the total afterwards, I got to make sure it's outside of the block. Print total. So now what's going on here? So now if you do the output, so now, sorry, if you take the value of total, first things first, it'll be 0. And then in the beginning, I will be 1. So then total equals to 0 plus I, which is 1, so it'll be 1. The next time it loops, I will now be 2. So now it'll be total equals to total, which is 1 right here, plus I, which is 2, 3. And so on and so forth, all the way until it reaches to 100. Okay? So this is an example of how you will use for I in range. Now, this is essentially what you need to know for loops for this class. When we get to talking about lists and explaining those, then I will be able to explain more in detail how it works, how lists work, and we will use also for loops for lists as well. But again, to summarize, for while loops in this class specifically, when it comes to the first type of while loop, which is a while loop with an iteration variable or a condition, that will be not that would honestly be very that will be pretty uncommon in this class, even honestly in the real world. It will be common, but not as much as the second type, which is a while true loop. This is what's going to be very, very common in this class, and specifically with while true, I mentioned that it mostly has to do with when you want to repeatedly ask the user for input. That is a use case that you'll need to worry about in this class specifically. There are other uses for while true, but in this class is specifically for this one, where, as I gave you the example here, you continuously ask the user for input until they put something in that you're looking for. And then after that, for loops, so the difference between, so for while loops, you're asking the user constantly for input until they put something in. Whereas for loops, the use case that you'll commonly find in this class, the two rather that we discussed here, is to go through a string or something. So I'll give you an example for this one here, for a string where you're going through it. Let's say I say create a program and count how many times the letter A appears in it. So immediately off the bat, you know two things. You know that you have to create a variable that will count how many times the letter A is in the word, right? So let's say we start off with that count. Initially, obviously, there are going to be 0 A's. Second thing you want is you're going to ask the user for the word that you want to search for. So you say word equals to input, enter a word. Okay. Then after that you say for, let's just say, let me change it up to show you guys that you can use anything, for char in word. Okay, so now you're going through that word one step at a time. So if the user put in, let's just say Python, it'll go through P, then Y, then T, then H, then O, then N. So you check if the current letter, which is stored in the variable char, if char equals to A, yeah, then count equals to count plus 1. If the current character is equal to A, then you just add 1 to the count. And then obviously again, you want to print it, you want to print that count in the end, so after the loop is done. So again, indent, but you want to show that count after the loop is done. Print count. That's it. So these two examples over here pretty much show what the main use cases for for loops will be in this class. It'll either be to go through letters one step at a time in whether it be a string, or go through elements one step at a time in a list, which I said I'll discuss later. And every single time check for something or do something with each letter or each item. Or it'll be, as I mentioned up here, where you're going to be using it to go through a set of numbers from whatever I define. Okay? So that pretty much concludes what we have to do for for loops in this class. Now, inshallah, the next step is to put all this together. So we've discussed if, elif, else. We've discussed for loops, while loops. The notes is straight bugging. But we've done for loops and while loops, right? Now the idea is to put all of this together into what are known as functions. And that will be the next topic. And then after that, we'll get into lists, inshallah.